First contact. In the vast expanse of the cosmos, the Zarthak Imperium had long considered itself the pinnacle of sentient evolution. Their society, built on cold logic and ruthless efficiency, had conquered countless star systems. Yet, as their scout ship Nebula Seeker approached the unremarkable yellow star on the edge of the Orion Arm, they were about to encounter a species that would challenge everything they thought they knew. Captain Salith stood on the bridge, her four eyes fixed on the holographic display of the solar system before her. Curious, she muttered, her tentacles twitching with interest. Third planet from the star. Nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, liquid water, life-bearing. Her second-in-command, Vextor, glided to her side. Primitive life forms, no doubt. Shall we catalogue and move on? Salith's upper eyes narrowed. No, there's something different about this one. Scan for artificial structures. Moments later, the ship's AA chirped. Analysis complete. Multiple artificial satellites detected in orbit. Numerous structures on the surface consistent with a technological civilization. The bridge fell silent. It was rare to find a species advanced enough to reach their own orbit, let alone one the Imperium hadn't already subjugated or made contact with. Magnify the largest landmass, Salith ordered. The hologram zoomed in, revealing a sprawling cityscape. Fascinating. They developed urban centers, transportation networks, and what's that? Vextor leaned in. It appears to be a military installation. Salith's tentacles curled with excitement. A species capable of warfare, how delightfully primitive, and yet intriguing. For days, the Nebula Seeker orbited the blue planet, which they learned the inhabitants called Earth. They intercepted communications, decrypted languages, and observed the bustling activities of the creatures known as humans. They're constantly in conflict, Vextor noted, reviewing the historical data. Wars, skirmishes, political tensions, how have they not annihilated themselves? Salith's response was thoughtful. Perhaps that's what makes them interesting. They survive despite their nature, or because of it. As they watched, they noticed increased activity around several military bases. It seemed the humans were preparing for some sort of large-scale operation. Captain, the ship's AA interrupted. I've detected unusual energy signatures from one of the military installations. It doesn't match any known weapon system in our database. Salith's curiosity was piqued. Prepare a stealth pod. I want a closer look. Vextor's tentacles writhed in alarm. Captain, that's against protocol. We're supposed to observe from orbit only. Protocols are for species we understand. Salith retorted. These humans, they're an anomaly. I need to see them up close. Hours later, a sleek, invisible pod detached from the Nebula Seeker, descending through Earth's atmosphere. Inside, Salith felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. It was rare for a Zarthak to experience such emotions, and the sensation was both foreign and exhilarating. The pod touched down silently in a forested area near the military base. Salith emerged, her chameleonic skin adapting to blend perfectly with her surroundings. She activated her personal cloaking device, rendering her completely invisible to human eyes and most forms of detection. As she approached the base perimeter, she was struck by the cacophony of sounds and smells. The Zarthak relied primarily on telepathic communication, and their homeworld was largely odorless. Here, the air was filled with the sharp scent of metal, the acrid smell of what she would later learn was coffee, and the musky odor of human sweat. Salith observed as humans in uniform moved about with purpose. Their faces were set in expressions of determination, fear, and something else she couldn't quite identify. She watched as they performed physical exercises, their bodies straining with effort. Inefficient, she thought. Why not enhance their bodies cybernetically? Yet she couldn't deny the strange beauty in their struggle, the way they pushed themselves beyond their natural limits. As night fell, Salith witnessed something that would forever change her understanding of sentient beings. A group of soldiers gathered around a fire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. One of them produced a stringed instrument, and soon haunting melodies filled the air. The soldiers began to sing. Their voices, sometimes harmonious, sometimes discordant, wove together in a tapestry of sound that stirred something deep within Salith. She felt her 3 hearts beating in an unfamiliar rhythm, her breath catching in her throat. The songs spoke of home, of loved ones left behind, of the fear of death and the hope for victory. Salith, who had always viewed emotions as a weakness, found herself moved in ways she had never experienced before. As the night wore on, she observed other rituals. Soldiers writing letters, their faces etched with longing. Others cleaning their weapons with reverent care, as if performing a sacred rite. Some knelt in prayer, their whispered words carrying a weight that transcended language. When dawn broke, Salith reluctantly returned to her pod. As she ascended back to the Nebula Seeker, her mind was awhirl with new thoughts and sensations. Vextor met her at the airlock. "Captain, you've violated at least 7 protocols. I must insist." Salith held up a tentacle, silencing him. "Prepare a full report for the Imperium," she said, her voice filled with an emotion Vextor had never heard before. Tell them we found something extraordinary." As the Nebula Seeker continued its orbit around Earth, Salith stood at the viewing portal, her gaze fixed on the blue planet below. She had come seeking data, perhaps even a new world to conquer. Instead, she had found something that challenged the very foundations of Zarthak philosophy. These humans, with their messy emotions and illogical rituals, had awakened something in her. She didn't yet have a name for it, but she knew that neither she nor the Imperium would ever be the same. As she watched the Earth slowly rotate beneath her, Salith made a decision. The Nebula Seeker would not be leaving anytime soon. There was too much to learn, too much to understand. And somewhere, deep in the recesses of her logical mind, a small voice whispered a dangerous thought. Perhaps, just perhaps, the Zarthak way wasn't the only path to greatness in the universe. The journey to understand humanity had only just begun. Certainly, I'll now write part 2 of the story, focusing on the alien observer and their growing fascination with human behavior. Part 2, The Observer. As the Earth continued its silent dance around the sun, the Nebula Seeker maintained its vigil. Captain Salith, driven by an insatiable curiosity, had made an unprecedented decision. She would personally lead an extended observation mission of this perplexing planet and its inhabitants. The Zarthak High Command had been skeptical at first, but Salith's initial report had piqued their interest. A species that thrived on conflict yet hadn't destroyed itself. A civilization that valued emotion as much as technology. It was an anomaly that demanded further study. Salith stood in her personal quarters, her 4 eyes fixed on the holographic display of the military base she had visited. She had replayed her recordings countless times, trying to decipher the meaning behind the human rituals she had witnessed. "Computer," she said, her voice tinged with an unfamiliar emotion, "analyze the acoustic patterns of the human vocalizations from time index 2300 to 2330. The AI responded promptly. Analysis complete. The vocalizations contain harmonic structures consistent with what humans call music. Emotional content analysis suggests themes of longing, camaraderie, and resilience." Salith's tentacles curled thoughtfully. Resilience, she mused. It was a concept the Zarthak understood, but not in this context. Their resilience came from technological superiority and logical planning. The human resilience seemed to stem from something intangible. A chime at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called. Vextor glided in, his posture rigid with concern. "Captain, we've detected increased activity at multiple military installations across the planet. It appears the humans are mobilizing for a large-scale conflict." Salith's upper eyes widened with interest. "Excellent. This is the opportunity we've been waiting for. Prepare my stealth pod. I'm going back down." Vextor's tentacles writhed anxiously. "Captain, I must protest. The risk of discovery is minimal," Salif interjected. "Our technology far surpasses theirs. Besides, the potential for new insights outweighs the risk." Hours later, Salif found herself once again on the outskirts of the military base. The atmosphere was electric with tension. Humans moved with increased urgency, their faces set in grim determination. As she observed, Salif noticed something peculiar. Despite the obvious stress, many of the humans engaged in behaviors that seemed counterproductive. They gathered in groups, engaging in physical contact that her research identified as hugs. Others sat alone, staring at small objects, photos, she realized, with expressions that made her three hearts clench inexplicably. One scene in particular captured her attention. A group of soldiers had gathered in a circle, their hands clasped. In the center stood an older human, his face lined with what Salif now recognized as the marks of age. "Brothers and sisters," the man began, his voice carrying a weight that transcended mere sound, "we stand on the precipice of battle. Tomorrow, we will face an enemy that threatens everything we hold dear. But remember this: our strength lies not in our weapons, but in our hearts, in our love for each other, for our families, for our way of life." Salif felt a strange sensation in her chest as she watched tears form in the eyes of the listening soldiers. The Zarthak had long ago eliminated such displays of emotion, viewing them as signs of weakness. Yet, as she observed the humans draw strength from their shared vulnerability, she began to question that assumption. The night wore on, and Salif witnessed a tapestry of human behavior that both confused and fascinated her. Soldiers engaging in friendly competitions, their laughter a stark contrast to the looming threat. Others seeking solitude, their faces etched with an emotion she was beginning to recognize as fear, yet tinged with something else, resolve perhaps. In one corner of the base, she observed a group of humans engaging in a ritual that involved moving their bodies in synchronization to rhythmic sounds. Her research identified this as dancing, but the term seemed woefully inadequate to describe the raw energy and emotion she witnessed. As dawn approached, Arlith made a decision that would alter the course of her mission and her life. Instead of returning to the Nebula Seeker, she would remain on Earth, pushing the limits of her stealth technology to observe the humans up close during the impending conflict. She sent a coded message to Vextor, extending ground mission indefinitely. Maintain orbit and stand by for reports. As the first rays of sunlight painted the sky, Salif watched the base come alive with activity. The air thrummed with the sound of engines as vehicles were prepared. Weapons were distributed, last-minute checks performed. But it was the faces of the humans that truly captivated her. In those expressions, she saw a complex mixture of emotions that defied easy categorization. Fear, yes, but also determination. Sadness intertwined with fierce pride, and something else, something she was only beginning to understand, hope. As the soldiers began to move out, Salif felt a surge of anticipation. She was about to witness these perplexing creatures in the heat of battle, to see firsthand how their strange rituals and emotional bonds would translate into action. For the first time in her long life, Captain Salif of the Zarthak Imperium felt something akin to excitement. The logical part of her mind insisted that she was merely gathering valuable data for the Imperium. But deep down, in a part of herself she was only beginning to acknowledge, she knew the truth. She was no longer just an observer. She was becoming invested in these humans, in their struggles and triumphs. And as she prepared to follow them into the unknown, she realized that this mission had become more than a scientific endeavor. It had become a journey of personal discovery, one that would challenge everything she thought she knew about life, intelligence, and the nature of strength in the universe. As the last vehicle rolled out of the base, Salif activated her cloaking device and set out, her heart beating with an unfamiliar rhythm. The next chapter in her exploration of humanity was about to unfold, and she was determined not to miss a single moment. Ritual revelations. The convoy of military vehicles wound its way through the countryside, a serpentine line of steel and determination. The Salith, invisible to human eyes, perched atop one of the transport trucks, her senses attuned to every nuance of the unfolding human drama. As they traveled, she observed the soldiers engaging in behaviors that defied her logical understanding. Some sang raucous songs, their voices a cacophony of bravado and barely concealed fear. Others sat in silence, their eyes fixed on distant horizons or small objects clutched in their hands, what she now understood to be talismans or reminders of home. One ritual, in particular, caught her attention. At regular intervals, the convoy would stop, and the soldiers would gather in small groups. They would produce small cylinders, cigarettes, her database supplied, and ignite them, inhaling the smoke deeply. Fascinating, Salith mused. They willingly inhale toxic substances, knowing the long-term health implications. Yet it seems to provide some form of comfort. As night fell, the convoy made camp in a dense forest. Salith watched with rapt attention as the soldiers established a perimeter, set up tents, and began their evening rituals. The air was thick with tension, yet underneath it all, she sensed an undercurrent of something else, a shared bond that seemed to transcend their individual fears. Near the center of the camp, a group of soldiers gathered around a small, carefully shielded fire. One of them produced a worn book, its pages yellowed with age. As he began to read aloud, Salith activated her translation matrix, eager to understand. In peace, sons bury their fathers. In war, fathers bury their sons. The soldier read, his voice carrying a weight that seemed to resonate through the entire camp. But let us not forget that in our darkest hours, we find the light of our shared humanity. Salith felt a strange tightness in her chest as she watched the faces of the listening soldiers. Some nodded solemnly, others wiped away tears. It was a display of emotion that would have been considered a sign of weakness in Zarthak society, yet here, it seemed to strengthen the bonds between these humans. As the night wore on, Salith witnessed more rituals that both confused and fascinated her. Soldiers writing letters home, their faces a mixture of longing and resolve. Others cleaning their weapons with an almost reverent care, as if preparing for a sacred ceremony rather than a battle. In one corner of the camp, she observed a small group engaged in what her database identified as prayer. Their heads were bowed, hands clasped, voices barely above a whisper as they appealed to unseen forces for protection and strength. Illogical, Salith thought, and yet, there's a power here I can't deny. As dawn approached, Salith noticed a change in the camp's atmosphere. The soldiers moved with renewed purpose, their faces set in grim determination. She realized with a start that the battle was imminent. What happened next would forever change Salith's understanding of humanity. The entire camp gathered in a large circle. At its center stood the commanding officer, his weathered face a map of experience and resolve. He began to speak, his voice carrying to every corner of the assembly. Men and women of the 47th, he began, today we face an enemy that threatens not just our lives, but our way of life. They think us weak because we value compassion. They see our diversity as division, but they don't understand the true source of our strength. Salith felt a surge of something unfamiliar as she watched the soldiers' reactions. Their spines straightened, their eyes shone with a fierce light. Our strength, the commander continued, comes from our bonds, from the love we have for each other, for our families, for our ideals. We fight not because we hate what's in front of us, but because we love what's behind us. A chorus of affirmations rippled through the crowd. Salith watched in amazement as the energy in the camp seemed to shift, fear giving way to a collective resolve that was almost palpable. Remember your training, remember your brothers and sisters beside you, and above all, remember why we fight. For freedom, for justice, for a future where our children can live in peace. As the commander finished speaking, something extraordinary happened. The soldiers began to embrace one another, offering words of encouragement and support. Salith saw tears, yes, but also smiles of fierce determination. It was a display of unity and emotion unlike anything she had ever witnessed. In that moment, Salih felt something shift within her. The logical part of her mind struggled to categorize what she was seeing, to fit it into neat, understandable boxes. But another part of her, a part she was only beginning to acknowledge, resonated with the raw emotion and shared purpose she witnessed. As the soldiers began to move out, preparing for the imminent battle, Salih made a decision that went against every protocol and principle of her training. She would not just observe this battle from a safe distance. She would follow these humans into the heart of conflict to witness firsthand how their rituals and bonds translated into action. Activating her most advanced stealth protocols, Salih prepared to shatter the human forces. Her mission had evolved far beyond simple data gathering. She was now on a quest to understand the very essence of what made these humans so resilient, so paradoxically strong in their vulnerability. As the first sounds of distant artillery fire echoed through the forest, Salih felt her 3 hearts beating in an unfamiliar rhythm. For the first time in her long life, she was experiencing something akin to anticipation, perhaps even excitement. The battle was about to begin, and with it, a new chapter in Salih's journey of discovery. A journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about strength, unity, and the power of the intangible bonds that seemed to give these fragile humans their extraordinary resilience. Cultural clash. The cacophony of battle engulfed Salih as she moved silently among the human soldiers. Explosions rocked the earth, and the air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Her advanced senses, normally a source of pride, now threatened to overwhelm her with the sheer intensity of the conflict. But it wasn't the violence that captivated her attention, it was the humans themselves. In the midst of chaos, she witnessed acts that defied her understanding of rational behavior. A soldier threw himself on a grenade, sacrificing his life to save his comrades. Another dragged a wounded friend to safety under heavy fire, risking everything for a single life. Inefficient, her logical mind argued. The loss of one to save many is acceptable, but this is madness. Yet she couldn't deny the results. The human unit moved with a cohesion and determination that seemed to draw strength from these very acts of madness. As the battle raged on, Salih found herself drawn to a small group of soldiers pinned down behind a crumbling wall. Their situation seemed hopeless, yet their faces showed not despair, but a grim resolve. "We're not dying here today, boys," one of them shouted over the din. "Remember what we're fighting for. Remember who we're fighting for." To Salih's amazement, the soldiers rallied. With a collective roar that seemed to drown out the sounds of battle, they charged forward, breaking through the enemy line in a display of coordinated fury. As night fell and the fighting lulled, Salih observed the aftermath. The humans tended to their wounded with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with their earlier ferocity. They mourned their dead, not with the efficient disposal of resources that the Zarthak practiced, but with rituals that spoke of deep emotional bonds. One scene in particular seared itself into Salih's memory. A young soldier cradled the body of a fallen comrade, tears streaming down his dirt-streaked face. "I promised I'd get you home, buddy," he whispered. "I promised." Salih felt a strange ache in her chest, a sensation so alien that it took her a moment to recognize it as empathy. The logical part of her mind recoiled at this weakness, but another part, growing stronger by the moment, was deeply moved. As she continued her observations, Salih found herself grappling with a profound cultural dissonance. Everything she witnessed seemed to contradict the principles that had guided Zarthak society for millennia. Where the Zarthak valued cold logic and emotionless efficiency, these humans drew strength from their feelings. Where her people saw individuality as a weakness to be suppressed, humans celebrated their differences, forming stronger bonds because of them, not in spite of them. In quiet moments between skirmishes, Salih observed rituals that further challenged her understanding. Soldiers sharing stories of home, their faces softening with longing and love. others finding moments of levity, sharing jokes that made no logical sense yet seemed to lift their spirits immeasurably. One evening, as the humans gathered around small fires, Salith witnessed a ritual that would haunt her for years to come. A soldier produced a small, rectangular device, a smartphone, her database supplied. From it emanated the sounds of a child's laughter and a woman's voice. "Daddy, when are you coming home?" the child's voice asked. "We miss you so much." The soldier's face, moments ago hard with the stress of battle, crumpled into an expression of such raw emotion that Salith felt physically struck. Around him, his comrades offered silent support, a hand on the shoulder, a nod of understanding. In that moment, Salith realized that she was witnessing something her own society had long ago discarded as unnecessary: the power of emotional connection. These bonds, far from being a weakness, seemed to be the very source of human resilience. As dawn broke on another day of battle, Salith found herself in a state of profound confusion. Her logical mind struggled to reconcile what she was witnessing with everything she had been taught. The Zarthak way, emotionless, efficient, coldly logical, had always seemed superior. Yet here, in the crucible of conflict, she was seeing a strength that defied easy categorization. These humans, with their messy emotions and illogical attachments, were displaying a form of power that she had never encountered before. They fought not just with weapons and strategy, but with heart and soul. As she prepared to follow the human forces into another day of battle, Salith realized that her mission had become far more than a simple observation. She was on a journey that was challenging the very foundations of her beliefs, forcing her to question everything she thought she knew about strength, survival, and the nature of intelligence itself. The cultural clash she was experiencing was no longer just between human and Zarthak society. It was a battle within herself, between the logical being she had always been and the emotional entity she was slowly, inexorably becoming. As the sounds of renewed fighting filled the air, Salith steeled herself for what was to come. She knew that whatever happened in the days ahead, she would never be the same. The humans had awakened something within her, a capacity for empathy and emotion that both thrilled and terrified her. The journey to understand humanity had become a journey to understand herself, and Salith was only beginning to grasp the profound implications of this transformation. The coming storm. The air crackled with tension as Salith observed the human forces regrouping. Days of intense fighting had taken their toll, but instead of the demoralization she expected, she sensed a growing determination among the soldiers. Intelligence reports had revealed that the enemy was massing for a final, decisive push, and the humans were preparing to meet this challenge head-on. As night fell, Salith witnessed an intensification of the rituals she had come to recognize. The quiet conversations, the shared meals, the moments of reflection, all took on a new depth and urgency. It was as if the impending battle had stripped away all pretense, leaving only the raw essence of human connection. In one corner of the camp, a group of soldiers huddled around a small fire. One of them, a grizzled veteran with eyes that had seen too much, began to speak. "I've been in more scraps than I care to count," he said, his voice low but carrying. "But tomorrow's different. We're not just fighting for a piece of land or a political ideal. We're fighting for everything, for the world we want our children to inherit." Salith felt a strange tightness in her chest as she watched the reactions of the other soldiers. There was fear, yes, but also a steely resolve that seemed to grow stronger with each word. Another soldier, barely more than a youth, spoke up. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice trembling slightly. "I keep thinking about my family, wondering if I'll ever see them again." To Salith's amazement, this admission of weakness didn't result in scorn or dismissal. Instead, the other soldiers rallied around the young man, offering words of encouragement and support. "Fear's normal, kid," the veteran said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Means you've got something worth fighting for. We all do. And that's what's going to get us through tomorrow." As the night wore on, Salith observed more intense manifestations of human ritual. A group of soldiers gathered to pray, their voices rising in a haunting harmony that sent shivers down her spine. Others wrote letters home, pouring their hearts out onto paper with an urgency that spoke of the uncertain future. In one particularly moving scene, Salif watched as soldiers exchanged small tokens, photos, trinkets, even pieces of their uniforms. She realized with a start that these were more than mere objects. They were physical manifestations of the bonds between these humans, tangible reminders of the connections that gave them strength. As dawn approached, bringing with it the promise of battle, the entire camp gathered for what Salif now recognized as a pivotal ritual. The commanding officer stood before his troops, his face etched with the weight of responsibility and the determination to see them through. "Men and women of the 47th, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the assembly, today we face our greatest challenge. The enemy thinks they know our strength. They've counted our numbers, assessed our weapons, but they've missed the most important thing." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled soldiers. "They've missed the strength of our spirit, the power of our unity. Each of you stands here not just as an individual, but as a part of something greater. You stand here carrying the hopes and dreams of those we've left behind, the legacy of those who've fallen, and the promise of a future we're fighting to protect." Salif felt a surge of something unfamiliar as she watched the soldiers' reactions. Their spines straightened, their eyes shone with a fierce light. It was as if the commander's words were physically transforming them, turning fear into determination, doubt into resolve. "Remember why we fight," the commander continued. "Remember the faces of your loved ones, the laughter of your children, the streets of your hometowns. That's what we're protecting today. That's what gives us our strength." As the speech concluded, Salif witnessed something that would forever change her understanding of humanity. The soldiers, moved by their commander's words, began to embrace one another. Not the formal, ritualized gestures she had observed before, but raw, emotional displays of affection and support. Tears were shed openly, words of encouragement exchanged. Salif saw hardened veterans comforting young recruits, longtime friends making solemn promises to watch each other's backs. It was a display of vulnerability and strength that defied her logical understanding. As the first light of dawn painted the sky, Salif felt a profound shift within herself. The Zarthak part of her mind struggled to categorize what she was witnessing, to fit it into neat, understandable boxes. But another part, growing stronger by the moment, resonated deeply with the raw emotion and shared purpose she observed. She realized, with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, that she was no longer just an observer. Somehow, without her even realizing it, she had become emotionally invested in the fate of these humans. Their struggle had become her struggle, their hopes and fears echoing within her in ways she never thought possible. As the soldiers began to move out, preparing for the battle that would decide everything, Salif made a decision that went against every protocol and principle of her training. She would not just observe this battle from a safe distance. She would follow these humans into the heart of conflict, to witness firsthand how their rituals, their bonds, their very humanity would fare in the crucible of war. Activating her most advanced stealth protocols, Salif prepared to shadow the human forces. Her mission had evolved far beyond simple data gathering. She was now on a quest to understand the very essence of what made these humans so resilient, so paradoxically strong in their vulnerability. As the sounds of distant artillery fire began to echo across the landscape, Salif felt her 3 hearts beating in an unfamiliar rhythm. For the first time in her long life, she was experiencing something akin to fear, not for herself, but for the humans she had come to admire. The coming storm was about to break, and with it, Salif knew, would come a test not just of human resilience, but of her own evolving understanding of strength, unity, and the power of the intangible bonds that seemed to give these fragile creatures their extraordinary might. Battle's eve. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the makeshift military encampment. An eerie calm settled over the area, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions Sci-Fi could sense brewing within each soldier. This was it, the night before the decisive battle that would determine the fate of so much they held dear. Sci-Fi, her cloaking device humming softly, moved silently through the camp. Her 4 eyes darted from scene to scene, drinking in every detail of this most crucial of human rituals, the preparation for possible death. In one corner, a group of soldiers huddled around a small battery-powered radio. The tinny sounds of music filled the air, a melody so hauntingly beautiful that Sci-Fi felt her 3 hearts constrict. "Hey, Jackson," one soldier called out, his voice thick with emotion. "It's that song. The one you always said reminded you of home." The soldier named Jackson closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a path down his dirt-streaked cheek. "Yeah," he whispered, "my daughter's favorite. She'd always ask me to dance with her when it came on." Sci-Fi watched in fascination as the group of hardened warriors swayed gently to the music, lost in memories of softer, happier times. It was a display of vulnerability that would have been unthinkable in Zarthak's society, yet here it seemed to strengthen the bonds between these humans. Moving on, she came across a solitary figure sitting cross-legged on the ground, hands cupped around a small flame. As Scarlett drew closer, she realized the soldier was burning something, small scraps of paper that crumbled to ash in the flickering light. "It's letters from home," a nearby soldier explained to his curious comrade, his voice barely above a whisper. "He says if he doesn't make it, he doesn't want the enemy reading his family's words, says it's too personal." The burning of the letters, a ritual of both protection and acceptance of possible fate, struck Sci-Fi deeply. The Zarthak viewed death as a mere cessation of function, but for these humans, it was laden with emotional significance that extended far beyond the individual. As the night deepened, Sci-Fi observed more rituals, each more poignant than the last. A group of soldiers gathered to share a meager meal, passing around a bottle of something they called whiskey. Each took a small sip, offering toasts to fallen comrades, to family back home, to the ideals they were fighting for. "To freedom," one grizzled veteran said, raising the bottle high. "To love," added a young soldier, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "To tomorrow," the final soldier said solemnly, "may we all live to see it." The power of these simple words, and the emotions they evoked, was almost overwhelming for Sci-Fi. She found herself wishing, for the first time in her life, that she could join them, could feel the burn of the whiskey and the warmth of their camaraderie. But it was the next ritual she witnessed that truly shook her to her core. In the center of the camp, a large group had gathered. At first, Sci-Fi thought it was another strategy meeting, but as she drew closer, she realized it was something far more profound. A soldier stood in the middle of the circle, reading from a worn book. His voice, strong and clear, carried across the hushed gathering. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff they comfort me." Sci-Fi's translator struggled with the archaic language, but the meaning was clear. This was not a strategic briefing, but a spiritual one. A calling upon forces beyond the physical realm for protection and strength. As the reading continued, Sci-Fi noticed something extraordinary. The soldiers, men and women of different races, backgrounds, and beliefs, all bowed their heads in respect. Some mouthed the words along with the reader, while others stood in silent contemplation. But all were united in this moment of shared vulnerability and hope. The night wore on, and Sci-Fi witnessed countless more small rituals, soldiers polishing their weapons with an almost reverent care. Others writing final letters home, pouring their hearts onto paper with an urgency that spoke volumes. Some simply sat in silence, their eyes focused on small photos or trinkets, tangible links to the world they were fighting to protect. As dawn approached, casting the first tentative rays of light across the camp, Sci-Fi felt a profound shift within herself. The logical, detached part of her mind that had always dominated her thoughts seemed to recede, replaced by something new and frightening and exhilarating. For the first time, she truly understood the power of these human rituals. They weren't just inefficient displays of emotion or illogical adherence to superstition. They were the very foundation of human strength, a way to forge connections, to find meaning in chaos, to transform fear into resolve. As the camp stirred to life, preparing for the battle to come, Salith made a decision that would change her life forever. She would not just observe this battle, she would experience it as the humans did, with all the fear, hope, and raw emotion that entailed. Deactivating her cloaking device, Salith stepped into view, her alien form causing a ripple of shock through the nearby soldiers. But as she raised her hands in a gesture of peace, she spoke the words that had been growing in her heart throughout the long night. "I am Salith of the Zarthak. I came to study you, but I stay to stand with you. Your fight is now my fight. Your hope is my hope." As the stunned soldiers processed her words, Salith felt a surge of emotion unlike anything she had ever experienced. Fear, yes, but also a profound sense of belonging, of purpose. The battle was about to begin, and Salith, changed forever by the rituals she had witnessed, was ready to face it not as an observer, but as a part of something greater than herself. The final test of human resilience, and of her own transformation, was at hand. Aftermath and reflection. The dust of battle had settled, leaving behind a landscape transformed by conflict. Salith stood atop a small hill, her four eyes scanning the horizon. The silence that followed the cacophony of war was deafening, broken only by the occasional groan of the wounded or the distant rumble of vehicles. The battle had been fierce, brutal, and unlike anything Salith had ever experienced. She had fought alongside the humans, her advanced technology and natural abilities proving to be a surprising asset. But it wasn't the tactics or the technology that had won the day. It was something far more intangible, something that Salith was only now beginning to truly understand. As she made her way through the aftermath, Salith observed the humans once again. But this time, she wasn't just an observer. She was a participant, feeling the weight of victory and loss as keenly as any soldier. She approached a group of soldiers gathered around a makeshift medical station. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and the acrid smell of spent munitions. A young medic worked tirelessly, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she tended to the wounded. "You're going to be okay, Johnson," the medic said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion evident on her face. "Just think about that little girl of yours. She's waiting for you to come home." Salith watched as the injured soldier's face, twisted with pain, softened at the mention of his daughter. She felt a surge of emotion that she now recognized as empathy, a concept that had been alien to her just days ago. Moving on, she came across a scene that struck her deeply. A group of soldiers were gathered in a circle, heads bowed. In the center lay the bodies of their fallen comrades, each covered with a flag. One by one, the soldiers approached, placing a hand on the flags, whispering words of farewell. "Rest easy, brother," one grizzled veteran said, his voice choked with emotion. "We'll take it from here." Salith felt her three hearts constrict. The Zarthak viewed death as a mere cessation of function, but here, among these humans, it was so much more. It was a loss felt deeply, a wound that would heal but always leave a scar. As the day wore on, Salith witnessed more rituals of aftermath. Soldiers sharing rations, tending to each other's wounds, offering words of comfort and encouragement. She saw laughter amidst the tears, hope rising from the ashes of destruction. In one poignant moment, she observed a young soldier pull out a crumpled photo from his pocket. It was smeared with dirt and blood, but the image was clear, a smiling woman holding a baby. "I made it, Sarah," he whispered to the photo. "I'm coming home." Salith felt a surge of something she now recognized as joy, tinged with a bittersweet understanding of the cost of victory. As night fell, the camp came alive with a different kind of energy. The immediate danger had passed, and now the humans turned to each other, seeking comfort and connection in the wake of their shared ordeal. Around a small fire, a group of soldiers began to sing. The melody was unfamiliar to Xalith, but the emotion behind it was universal. It spoke of home, of love, of the bonds that had carried them through the darkest hours. Xalith found herself drawn to the group, no longer content to observe from a distance. As she approached, the singing faltered for a moment, but then resumed, stronger than before. A space was made for her in the circle, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. As she sat among the humans, feeling the warmth of the fire and the even greater warmth of acceptance, Xalith realized that her mission had evolved into something far beyond data collection or even cultural understanding. She had come to Earth as an observer, a detached scientist studying an alien species. But she was leaving as something else entirely. The rituals she had witnessed, the emotions she had experienced, had fundamentally changed her. The humans, with their messy emotions and illogical attachments, had shown her a kind of strength that defied quantification. It wasn't about physical prowess or technological superiority. It was about connection, about finding meaning in the face of adversity, about the incredible resilience of the spirit. As the night deepened and stories were shared around the fire, Xalith made a decision. She would return to her people, but not as the same being who had left. She would bring back not just data, but a message about the power of emotion, the strength found in vulnerability, and the incredible capacity of sentient beings to grow, to change, and to connect. The humans had taught her that true strength lay not in cold logic or emotional detachment, but in the ability to feel deeply, to forge bonds, and to find hope even in the darkest of times. As she looked around at the faces illuminated by the flickering firelight, Xalith felt a profound sense of gratitude. These humans, in all their complicated, messy, beautiful humanity, had given her a gift beyond measure. They had shown her what it truly meant to be alive. The journey ahead would be challenging. Explaining her transformation to her people, bridging the gap between Xalith logic and human emotion, would be no easy task. But as Xalith phased up at the star-filled sky, she felt ready for whatever lay ahead. For she was no longer just an observer. She was a part of something greater, a participant in the grand, chaotic, beautiful dance of life. And that, she realized, was the greatest discovery of all.